Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. The podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. I'm Tami Sims, lead trainer for the Institute and a full-time real estate professional in St. Petersburg, Florida for more than 20 years. In this episode, we're going to explore the exploding development and popularity of luxury branded residences. But first, today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood, anywhere. Go to realmarketingforyou.com. That's real marketing, the number 4, you.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. Now, I'm here again today with my co-host Jack Miller, who is with Parks Real Estate in the greater Nashville market in Middle Tennessee. Jack has specialized in luxury homes and relocation services for almost 25 years. So, Jack, welcome. It's great to see you as always.
You too, Tami. Good to be here.
So, we're going to talk today about something that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, and that is luxury branded residences. Now, I think that many of us are familiar with the Four Seasons and the Ritz-Carlton brands that combine 4 and 5-star hotel level amenities with exclusive private residences. Now, doing some research for this, I discovered that this kind of residence dates back to the Sherry Netherlands Hotel on New York's Fifth Avenue, which sold 165 of these type of units in the 1920s. But it didn't have wide popularity, though, until the Four Seasons debuted their Boston residences in 1985. Now, if we're talking about those really well-known brands, Jack, I know that you've got a Four Seasons residence in Nashville, right?
We do, yeah.
And so I want you to tell us about the kind of individuals that you've seen that are attracted to that property, and what kind of amenities they have. What makes it special? What makes people want them?
Well, it's very interesting when you look at the demographic who purchased at Four Seasons here in Nashville. So, first of all, we had a lot of folks who live in the suburbs of Nashville, the upscale suburbs, who really wanted to have an opportunity to have a footprint in the downtown market and have the ability to come into downtown and stay for the weekend or for a holiday or a special occasion. And so we had a lot of folks locally who were purchasing at the Four Seasons um, before the building was ever built because they wanted to have that place to stay when they went to a Titans game, the NFL game,
So
or a
I'm
hockey
I'm
game.
gonna I'm gonna interrupt you right there. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
just get a room at the Four Seasons for the weekend? Right. This is like a big commitment going for
No, it is. You're right. You're right.
a secondary residence.
Well, I think there's two prongs to it because I think a lot of our, most of our clients who are in the luxury realm own more than one residence, and so I think they saw that as both, something that sounded fun, okay, like staying downtown for the night, but more importantly, saw it as an opportunity for an investment as well as something that would be fun. So they looked at it almost like a vacation property, even though it's more of a staycation. So you actually make a commitment. You're buying this property, and you're able to walk. In our case, in Nashville, walk to the honky tonks, to the nightlife, walk to the Titans game, the Predators games, to the theater, or whatever one most wonderful restaurants that we have downtown. So it gives them the opportunity to have not just that place, 30, 45 minutes away from downtown in the upscale, perhaps gated communities or whatever, but also to have that downtown nightlife experience on demand. So I think that was a big part for the locals. And then we had a lot of folks from out of town who were purchasing because they love Nashville. They like to visit Nashville. And like you said, they oftentimes will come and stay in a hotel. But rather than just stay in a hotel, they're making a commitment to Nashville and they're making a purchase here. And they're sharing with their friends back home, typically in larger markets, that we have a place in Nashville at the Four Seasons. And I think with that in mind, a lot of those folks were also buying from an investment standpoint because a lot of them who purchased in Nashville speculatively ended up putting their homes in the market almost immediately for sale shortly after the building was complete, after only staying here for a few times. Some of those folks, really use it strictly as an investment
Mm,
because they bought when it was a concept, but they're selling when the building was complete. So
right.
that's a little bit about the demographic and I guess the reason for purchasing before we go into talk about the amenities. That
Hmm.
was the real appeal. It's got a great investment appeal.
And that to me is the same equation that you'd have in any new construction project of folks that purchase pre-construction speculatively, and have every intention of reselling, but they're leveraging that brand recognition as
Yeah.
something really important. Do you know off the top of your head, and I didn't pose this question as we were preparing, so you may not know this. Do you know off the top of the head what the rental policies are in the Four Seasons in your area?
Yeah, you can rent your unit with a traditional lease. They don't do short-term rentals.
Okay.
And obviously, because you don't want to have, short-term rentals at the Four Seasons private residences competing with a hotel stay at the Four Seasons. That's obviously a conflict of interest.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so they don't offer short-term rental options. But yeah, a lot of folks there have been doing, a lot of folks who purchased have actually rented their properties on a lease. Again, they're holding it for the resale value down the line because
Hmm.
I think when you talk about branded residences, even though we're talking about a building, it's almost like buying on a golf course or buying
Yep.
on the waterfront. Yeah, there'll be other high-rise residences in downtown Nashville. There are plenty of them already here, but there's only one Four Seasons. And we're about to have soon also a Ritz-Carlton competing.
Hmm.
There'll be one Ritz-Carlton. So if you're loyal to Ritz-Carlton or you're
Right.
loyal to Four Seasons, there's only going to be one in Nashville. And if you're one of the first buyers, early in adopters, typically that's your best opportunity for return on
Yeah.
investment.
And I think in my head I kind of answered the question of why not just rent a suite for for the weekend or for a week or whatever. When we're talking about these amenities, which we're going to dive into a little bit, so when you've got a Four Seasons residence, then if you're coming in for the week, you can have the concierge stock your refrigerator, make
Yeah.
sure that everything is all set, and you've got that creature comfort like of being in your own home, as opposed to just being in a hotel room, being reliant on outside services. So that to me answers a question that I posed of why would you do that? So,
Well, the other part of it too, if you're making routine visits, regular visits, if we've got folks who do business in Nashville who are here frequently, but they don't live here as a primary residence, and we also have folks who love to visit Nashville and come often. Sometimes it's driven by following sports franchises or just loving the Nashville nightlife. Other times it's things more close to home, so to speak. Their kids go to Vanderbilt University or
mhm,
Belmont University or one of the other universities here in Nashville, and they want to be able to come frequently, but they don't want to drag the suitcase around every time they either get on a plane or get in a car. So
yep,
when they arrive in Nashville at the Four Seasons, they pull up the concierge or to the valet, and they're greeted by folks who know who they are by name when they arrive, and they walk into their unit. And their clothes are there. A lot of their clothes are there, and
mhm,
their refrigerator is stocked because they contacted concierge and had it stocked in advance of their visit, and it's ready to go as opposed to the hotel experience, which is again very upscale if you stay at the Four Seasons or a similar brand, but you've got to bring the suitcase with you and get your room
yeah,
ready and look where things are, and it's always a different room. And here it's the same place at your home.
got it, got it. And for me, I always look to make sure that there's coffee in the room, right?
Yeah.
When I get there, and if it's your residence, you've got that covered.
Well, they
I know
offer
that's
some. The really nice thing about these branded residences is, you know, all of the type of properties that you and I typically discuss in this podcast, whether it's, we've had discussions previously about experiences and
mhm,
experience purchasing, what purchasing on a golf course or a lake or the ocean or whatever. But regardless of what type of buyer is coming in to stay here or purchase here, you're having that ultimate experience when you arrive at a branded residence. Of course, it's upscale, but it's not just upscale. When you buy at the Four Seasons or you buy at the Ritz-Carlton, from one market to another, there's a certain degree, a certain expectation you have of what that experience is going to be like.
mhm,
You know what a Four Seasons experience is. And so a lot of folks who purchased at Four Seasons, they've owned Four Seasons residences in other markets or may own them currently, or
Yeah.
they've stayed at Four Seasons all over the world. They know what that experience expectation is.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about a little bit more, I'm sure, in a minute about
Mm-hmm.
again, what those amenities look like.
Yeah.
But it's not just the amenity, it's the entire experience associated with it.
Yep. So it makes sense that individuals who have the means to experience that kind of luxury in their residence would appreciate those brand affiliations, that brand loyalty that you just mentioned. But it's surprising to me to see the other types of brands that are entering that arena. Right. So we've been talking about Four Seasons and the Ritz-Carlton. They have that residential, they have that lodging component.
Mm-hmm.
But here's a couple of others that caught my eye doing the research. So Aston Martin in Miami's Biscayne Bay, those residences. When you purchase one, you have your choice of an Aston Martin DB11 Riverwalk Edition or a DBX Riverwalk Edition, which is Aston Martin's first SUV. So there you're getting the place, the brand, and a car, right? Not just a car, an Aston Martin. And then on the automobile theme, so Bentley is building a private residence in Miami where some of the prime condos are going to have their own private car elevators, right? Which will allow them to drive straight into the building and up to their apartment without getting out of their car. So
Let
that's
me ask
kind
you a
of
question
an
about that, though.
extreme. Yeah.
So are there, are when they do, and because we don't have those types of private residences in Nashville, at least not yet. If you buy a Bentley residence, do they ever pair the traditional Bentley product with the Bentley branded residences where you're purchasing a package? Do they ever pair the car with the residence
Well,
as
just
part of
like
the
the Aston
purchase?
Martin package that I was just mentioning, in this particular residence, I didn't see any evidence of that,
Hmm.
but I understand that some of the Porsche
Hmm.
buildings also in that Miami area, we're going to hear that again, that while they're capitalizing on folks that are already owners of that brand, I imagine
Hmm.
that there's all sorts of arrangements for upgrading one's automobile in conjunction with that. But that's a really interesting question on Bentley, and they didn't mention that. Now, let's shift from the cars to clothing brands. Armani. Armani is also in the Miami area. And so the building, all of the interior design, decor, all of those features were individually designed by Giorgio Armani. And in this particular instance, they have a 300-foot stretch of private beach on Miami, right? So you're getting that brand and also some other exclusivity. And then, of course, I think most of our audience has probably heard of the Waldorf or Astoria, right? And
Sure, certainly, yeah.
I would have thought that that would have been the first one, right? I was kind of surprised with the Sherry Netherlands, but the Waldorf in New York is currently being completely refurbished to bring life back to those prestigious residences, right? And I think if we think back to great old movies, right? So somebody would have an apartment. It was actually in the hotel tower, right? I think it's a new
Right.
phenomenon that we have the separate towers, the separate structure for the residences. But right, I'm thinking of famous movie stars in their robe with feather trim and their martini, right? Enjoying their apartment in the sky. But so,
You're invoking Roaring Twenties and
right, having a little
yeah.
fun in my head there. I hope that the audience just got a nice little visual in their head too. But so you mentioned, Jack, that you're not in a market that has these types of residences beyond the two that you mentioned. And honestly, I'm not either, although I'll mention in a little bit, there's a couple of them cropping up that are within an hour of my market. Um, you also mentioned that some of these clientele also own second homes that may indeed be these brands that they have loyalty to. And so I'm wondering how and if there's an opportunity for us to promote these types of second homes to our clients that might want that level of service. Have you thought about that at all?
Well, yeah, and I think the folks who are marketing those branded residences wherever they're located, they know that too. They're tracking obviously where their buyers coming from, just like you and I do. They know where their buyers come from, which markets are the biggest feeder markets, and that's why when you look in, for example, if you look at print publications in our market, or you look at websites that focus on real estate, residential real estate, and the luxury brands, you'll oftentimes see marketing for some of these private residences, luxury residences that are branded in other markets where Nashville is a feeder market. So they know people are coming from our area and purchasing in other areas. So I don't know that we've done necessarily done a good job at promoting brands in other markets to our consumer here, to our buyers and sellers in our market. It comes up in conversation a lot, but it seems to be more of a a dinner party topic than a sit down conversation about, hey, I
Yeah,
want to talk to you about this branded residence in another market. It comes up casually, I think, more than by design, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
which is
I'd love
which
to
is
hear from you,
perfectly
Tammy.
fine.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I'd love to hear from you about what types of things you're seeing. And I can share some of ours too. What are you seeing in the branded residences? Because here, I mentioned, of course, we have the Four Seasons and we have the Ritz-Carlton that's under construction currently. We've also got some branded residences in the suburbs. Troubadour is one that comes to mind, very upscale. It's in Williamson County, and that's a Discovery Land product. And they've got communities all over the country. And so once again, it's that people who live in those communities. They know what to expect before they come to the gate. They know and they understand the basic concept and the level of luxury that they would expect in purchasing there. But what types of things are you seeing in the branded residences in your market in St. Pete?
So I'm glad that you asked about the amenity levels, Jack, because while we don't necessarily have a lot in my market, I have in my travels representing the Institute encountered a lot of different luxury branded residences around the country. And so the kind of amenities that they're offering. Obviously, you've got the type of concierge service that we just talked about stocking your refrigerator and that sort of thing. But you also have access to 24-hour concierge service, valet service, certainly full housekeeping services, which typically wouldn't come with a condominium residence. And then also you have access to the facilities of the resort, which would include like 24-hour room service, if you will, right?
Right.
In apartment dining, grocery service, dog walking, spa services. Certainly, a lot of these residences will, be affiliated, and if the hotel has a spa, of course, you get access to that, rather than maybe having their own, right? Like we're used to a luxury condo building that has a fitness center and
Right.
a catering kitchen and all that. But if you've got access to the fully staffed, fully used services of the resort in particular. And I imagine that those other types of branded residences that we mentioned that aren't resort affiliated probably offer some of those services, maybe contracted versus full-time staff, but that's probably a kind of a variable. So what kind of other services do you think you might find in these places? Maybe we're brainstorming to give some ideas to the next generation of developers.
Well, I know what we see here. One of the things that's kind of fun. I know that with Four Seasons in Nashville, it's located adjacent to a dog park downtown, and there's a doggy spa within the Four Seasons, so you can bring your dog in by appointment, have your dog bathed and groomed and all that sort of thing.
At the Four
And then there's a doggy
Seasons.
park, right? Yeah, at the Four
Wow.
Seasons, right? So you have a doggy spa in addition to the wellness spa for both guests and for residences. And that's the interesting thing too is that so I know this is, as I've spoken with colleagues in different markets, the some of the branded residences have independent amenities when there's a hotel and private residences in the same building, and that's something some of our listeners may not realize. So some of the Four Seasons, for example, are strictly hotels, depending on what market you go to, while others, like the model we have here in Nashville, is both hotel and private residences. They have completely separate lobbies. So
Hmm.
if you're a guest at the Four Seasons, you have access to all the Four Seasons amenities, but you can't access the
The
private
residences.
residences. However, if you are an owner within private residences, you have access to all the amenities for private residences. And in addition, you can walk seamlessly through one lobby into the next and have access to everything that guests of the Four Seasons have access to as well. And so there is some redundancy. So, for example, at Four Seasons Hotel, there's a beautiful, workout fitness facility overlooking the river and downtown. It's wonderful as you would expect. But there's also a private fitness facility just for private residences. It's not as large, also super nice with a spectacular view where you can work out, treadmill, whatever, and look downtown, look across the rooftops of all the honky tonks and all the partying down below while you're working out. It's very entertaining. So some of those have duplicate amenities, and some of them are shared. So again, there's a sky deck for the hotel. There's a sky deck just for private residences. So if you and your guests want to go down and have grill out, have a cookout on the rooftop, you're not competing with folks in the Four Seasons Hotel.
Got it.
So
And that that
there's a
that
lot of
makes
different amenities like that.
yeah, and it makes perfect sense, the fitness center that I hadn't thought about that before, right? So you would want to share the spa with anybody else that was enjoying the spa,
Hmm. Yeah.
but you would want your own fitness center as opposed to sharing that with hotel guests. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is I remember when we've sold, I think, probably a half a dozen or so units at Four Seasons, and it's only about a year and a half or so old. But one of the things I know that their on-site sales really pitch is not just the brick and mortar, not just the building, not just the amenities, the list of amenities, but the level of service. That's what I think people are looking for with these
Hmm.
branded residences. It's not just that they have a concierge, but it's the ultimate concierge.
Yeah.
And an example that was given, I think, is really neat. I remember the girl that worked here on site during pre-sale was sharing that at one because she had moved around from one project to another, all within the
Hmm.
Four Seasons family, and she said to give an example of the level of service, we had one of our homeowners had left and forgotten his briefcase and jumped on a flight without his briefcase for an important presentation, and their concierge happened to know they had a pilot in the same building who's going to that same city on a regular basis. Contacted the pilot. He said, "Yeah, I've got a flight going today, going to Chicago." So they went and got his briefcase, brought it to the pilot. He put it on the plane, brought it to the brought it to the airport, and they picked it
Wow.
up with a courier and brought it to the Four Seasons in Chicago. This is not a routine experience, but
Yeah.
that's the level of experience. So they really were selling that story, saying our guys know whatever it takes to please, our guests and please our owners. That's what we're selling.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you talk about the Disney experience. The Disney. It's not just about the ride; it's about the entire experience, and that's the
Right,
expectation.
right, right. And
Different
to me,
industry, but the same
that
principle.
scenario that you just described, right? The briefcase, like it totally was like a James Bond episode
Yeah, oh
going
yeah,
off in my head, right? So
right.
it's funny that this topic has evoked so many different visual images in our head, right? But isn't that what experiential living is about, right? You think about this level of wealth, you want that level of experience, right? That level of, I don't know, excitement, all of that. Um, but it also makes me think that this is a pretty limited pool of buyers. And
Sure.
as we were talking, as we opened up, uh, these developments just keep coming and coming. And so, for example, there's a new St. Regis residence in the works in Miami. And even in my neck of the woods, I just saw an announcement for a serviced residence in Sarasota affiliated with SOTA Residences and Hotels. And yesterday, I saw something about a new Ritz Residences in
Mhm.
Tampa. And then here was an interesting one I saw about a resort that is set to open this year in the Abacos that only has 50 residences, and you have to get there by helicopter, right? And so there are all these things. And so Forbes, in an article that they released recently, said globally there are about 700 branded residences with nearly the same number in development, all scheduled to launch by 2030. And
That's
none,
fascinating.
yeah, right? That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
huge.
Hmm.
Non-hotel branded residences, including those associated with restaurants, automobiles, fashion, and jewelry, are expected to increase by 40% within 7 years. And that's going to be comprising then, when they're completed, about 20% of the world's branded residence stock. That's an awful lot of these properties for not an awful large pool of buyers. And so I'm just curious, Jack, do you think this level of development is sustainable?
It's a good question. I think it's sustainable in certain markets, and that's really what drives all of this. You can't have a Ritz-Carlton in every market. You just
Yeah.
can't. Every market won't support it. You can't have a Four Seasons in every market. It's really you've got to be. It has to be a market of a certain size, but it's also got to be a market with a certain amount of wealth and a market that's on a certain trajectory. When you look at certain cities across the country, it's very clear there are certain cities that are booming. The growth is amazing.
Hmm.
You could do crane watch. There's cranes all over the cities, and we're very fortunate. We have a ton of cranes downtown. Nashville's a booming place. We're not in New York. We're not LA. We're not Miami, but we're on that trajectory. And so investors are seeing that in a place like Nashville. And that's why we have a Four Seasons. That's why we have a Ritz
Hmm.
Carlton in progress, and there's more on the way. And there's lots of cities like ours who are in that same, these are the growth opportunities. So I think when you hit the markets that are in this growth trajectory, there's absolutely room for all of the above. But
Hmm.
there's also places that are not doing so well, that's the dynamic of our economy. It's just how it works. It's supply and
Yeah.
demand.
And it also strikes me some of this buyer pool has the means to own more than one, right? So it's not that
Sure.
they've got to choose one out of these 700 or soon to be 1,400.
Right. Mm.
They can choose one in each market, right? So in addition to what you described about the market, the area that it needs to be, it also needs to be a destination, right? An attractive destination for somebody to want
Yeah.
to have a second home. And that could be geographical, right? Beaches, that sort of thing, but also could be good metropolitan areas in terms of business and commerce, right? Destinations where somebody might be traveling for business, as you mentioned. And then I'm thinking about, so there's this whole list of the other types of brands, like Aman and Bulgari, Baccarat, Fendi, Auberge, right? Those are all brands that have a different kind of brand loyalty than we talked about with the Ritz and the Four Seasons, because they're different breeds.
Sure.
But if we think about what we talk about in the training of the fact that how long someone has had their wealth plays into their attitudes about spending and about luxury brands.
Hmm.
And so for some people, let's call them the nouveau riche, if you will. The affiliation with that outward facing luxury brand is something that they want, right? That tells the world,
Sure.
look at me, I'm
Right.
successful.
Right. Right.
But then there were some of these other developments, like the one in the Abacos, right? I didn't recognize the name of that brand, and there's a whole long list that you can find if you do some research of brands that I'd never heard of. And that to me speaks to the bespoke, the quiet wealthy, those folks that have had a significant level of wealth for long enough that they're looking for luxury brands that are exclusive and bespoke, that only somebody at their level of wealth would understand that brand.
Hmm.
And so that kind of comes to mind. And you think about how that relates to some of the clients that you have in terms of just their mindset and, right, like who might go in which direction.
Well, so very interesting. Yeah, the thing that we do concentrate on here a bunch is, because we started out in this podcast talking about uh, marketing these brands that are in other markets to our clients here. We haven't done much of that, as I mentioned earlier, but what we do focus on, we've got a lot of clients who are wealthy and live in upscale communities in the outlying areas in the greater Nashville area, who are the perfect candidate to purchase these branded residences downtown because they have the means to do it, And there's a lot of folks who love the idea of going downtown and spend the weekend downtown Nashville, or sharing that residence with their friends who are coming to visit. A lot of us, I've heard this from a lot of my clients, they love having visitors not necessarily in the house but nearby. And so when they
Right.
when they buy a Ritz-Carlton, or they buy a Four Seasons downtown, it's almost like having an extended guest house for your property. It's like, come visit us in Nashville. Hey, stay at our Four Seasons unit. We'll meet you
Right.
downtown for dinner. Then you go back to the Four Seasons, and we'll go back to Brentwood.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of my clients sharing stories like that. That they use it for that, or they use it to gift their friends who want to visit the area or whatever. Gift clients. Another thing is bringing
Hmm.
clients into town. If you have that kind of sales force where you can gift them to stay at the Four Seasons or stay at the Ritz-Carlton or whatever the particular brand is. There's lots of opportunities here. And so, yeah, we definitely capitalized on that. That's why we did as many units as we did in such a new building, because of clients who live here in the area who thought that sounded like a terrific idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we wrap up for this episode, it makes me think back to how we can capitalize on this concept of brand loyalty and high level service as commodity is not the right word, but if we know that those concepts are causing people to pay more money than they would pay for something else. As real estate professionals, if we focus on delivering that level of service and building that essentially that brand loyalty within our sphere of influence, that can absolutely play into to our success and growth as real estate professionals. Wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah. And I think anytime that we have an opportunity to bring representatives from these brands into the fold and partner with our um, real estate firms who focus on the luxury home community, that's a great co-branding opportunity. Anytime we can do that. As a matter of fact, I mentioned to you before the podcast, I would love to bring some of those folks into our podcast, perhaps, and talk to some folks from some of these branded residences and let them share their experience, because a lot of those folks have moved from one community to another, one market to another, and they have different experiences in one market versus another. It'd be a
Yeah.
very interesting insight, I think.
Yeah, and so I'm going to invite our audience, if you'd like us to drill deeper on this and maybe bring on somebody who's a representative of one of these luxury branded residences, please say so, and let us know if you want to take this a little further. But for today, I think that we have covered the high points and hopefully just heightened the curiosity of our audience about the concept of luxury branded residences and the opportunity that it affords us. So, any last thoughts that you want to share, Jack?
No, except I'll say this. Anytime I have an opportunity to have a meal or a drink at a brand new residence is always wonderful. So if I'm in a city I'm unfamiliar with, again, if you recognize that brand,
That's
this is
right.
gonna be wonderful. You know.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of Estate of Mind, the art of selling luxury real estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find out more at www.luxuryhomemarketing.com. And if you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And as always, if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.